Good Thursday morning, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're going to have a fun show today. A little bit later on, Seth Emerson going to be here with us. We'll kind of get up to date on everything happening at UGA practice this week ahead of the game against Missouri on Saturday. Also, a little special guest on our program later on as well to tell you about some big stuff going on in Athens on Saturday. But we'll begin the show with an explanation of why the Georgia offense that's been pretty good so far this season may be even better by the time the year is done. It's all on the way next as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We talked a lot yesterday about Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, and I kind of gave you some stats that I thought suggested that Fromm may be better this season than some people have given him credit for, and that if called upon to do something big for Georgia before the end of the year, that Fromm looks like the kind of quarterback who may be more than capable of doing just that. I got a lot of interesting reactions to that conversation. Some of it on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. Some of it came in the comment section, both when I posted the audio version of the show at DawgNation.com and on our Facebook Live video throughout the morning. And I kind of wanted to sum up what a lot of folks seem to be saying back to me by playing you a couple of clips from what people said both on this show and on AT&T SEC Country Live yesterday about kind of the same subject. Let me start with Georgia quarterback David Green, or former Georgia quarterback David Green, who was on at near the end of yesterday's show. And if you haven't heard the full show yet, or if you missed yesterday's show, I think you'll really like the interview with David Green. But I posed the question to him of, hey, what have you seen from Jake Fromm this season? And if Jake Fromm is called upon to do more, if the passing game is asked to be a bigger part of the Georgia offense, what do you think Fromm's going to do at that moment? And I thought David Green had a pretty interesting answer. He said, hey, right now, there's really no need to do anything different because right now this team's running the ball so well. And that's the identity that this Georgia offense has kind of established for itself. Here's how David Green said that on DawgNation Daily yesterday.
There's a lot of different ways to win a football game. And I think the problem is we're so used to playing like fantasy football where we look at stats. But at the end of the day, the name of the game is to win. And when you got a good defense and you've got solid special teams and you've got an efficient quarterback and a great running game, you can win championships that way. And Alabama's done it for a long time. You can win a bunch of different ways. And I like the way we're finally kind of forming an identity, which we didn't have at all last year offensively. And this year, I mean, we've got that good running game, and I think Fromm's done outstanding. I mean, there's times he's looked like a true freshman, but all in all, he's made some big plays. He's not turning the ball over, and he's playing with a ton of confidence.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt about that. If you want to compare the Georgia offense in 2017 to one from 2016, clearly there's an identity in place right now that was not in place last year. Now, I think that David's probably right that team last year didn't have much of an identity at all, but if it did have an identity, unfortunately, it's probably a negative one. It was more about kind of being, from week to week, kind of a different team and really having a difficult time asserting itself in any regard. This team, though, is a little bit more like a bully. I mean, it steps on the field and kind of lets you know right from the jump what it wants to try to do. As Kirby Smart said, they want to try to make opposing teams quit. That's a pretty cool identity for a team to establish, the kind of offense that sort of comes around and starts pushing people around from the word go. And given the nature of that Georgia offense right now, I thought that Mike Johnson said something interesting on AT&T SEC Country Live yesterday. Now, he's my partner on that show every day. He's also a weekly guest for us here on DawgNation Daily. And he said, the description that Green just gave you of Jake Fromm makes Fromm sound a little bit like a game manager. Sometimes game manager can be kind of a negative connotation when you describe a quarterback that way. But Mike on SEC Country Live yesterday said, honestly, when it comes to a Jake Fromm right now, that phrase shouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
I don't feel like the game manager thing is derogatory. I think when you have a successful program like Auburn, like Georgia is doing, like Alabama's done for the past 10 years, you're going to have these guys that don't throw into double coverage. Yeah. Don't do anything crazy. Don't throw interceptions. That's what these guys are all being asked to do. Jake Fromm, I think, has 1 or 2 interceptions this year. Jalen Hurts has 0 interceptions. Jared Stidham has been a model of efficiency since the Clemson game for Auburn, and I think that's been the right combination. It's not a knock on Jake Fromm. He's been incredible with what he's been asked to do, but right now this offense focuses around this offensive line and this running game, and that's the way it should continue to be if Georgia's going to be successful.
So what Mike says there is not wrong, and what David Green said in the clip that you heard a couple of moments ago, that's not wrong either. But the reason why yesterday on the show I wanted to make the case that I believe that Fromm is more than a game manager, and when George is called upon to, sort of show that later in the season that he may be equal to that task, is because of that very point. That at some point in time this year, George is going to be in a game where it's not winning by 28 points. Now, that may not come to the end of the season, and, maybe Georgia's going to have some easy, comfortable wins between now and then in a lot of Saturdays, but there's going to be a tough game for Georgia at some point in time, and the other two teams that Mike just mentioned there, Auburn and Alabama, probably very much the same way. You're going to play a tough game at a certain point, and you're going to ask your quarterback to do more in those games when you get there. And I think for Georgia, that's both a challenge and an opportunity. Obviously, the challenge is to play the game a little different way than Georgia's played through the first half of the 2017 season. But here's where the opportunity comes in. And here's why I think when it comes to the Georgia offense in 2017, the best may actually be yet to come. We may see a version of Georgia's offense in the second half of the season that's far better than the one that's shown up in the first half of the season, even though this offense so far has gotten the job done. And the reason why that is because I think there are a couple big-time athletes, big-time players who just haven't gotten as involved in the Georgia offense yet, but I think they will be big parts of the Georgia offense by the end of the season. I don't think it's a coincidence here. All the guys I'm about to talk about are all themselves former five-star players coming out of high school, because we know the athleticism that's required to achieve that status in the recruiting process, and we may see that athleticism that gave these guys big reputations in high school show up for Georgia in the crucial moments that are set to come in the second half of the 2017 season. Let me start with a guy whose name comes up all the time on DawgNation Daily. A lot of questions, a lot of comments. This is true all around DawgNation.com. Why haven't the tight ends been more part of the Georgia offense? The question goes. Why specifically hasn't the former five-star tight end Isaac Nada been a bigger part of the Georgia offense thus far this season? Well, yesterday, Nada met with the media in Athens, and he actually kind of gave his thoughts about what's going on here and why isn't he more a part of the offense, and kind of what he's been doing while he hasn't been catching passes. And I think if you're a Georgia fan, what Nada the tight end says here is actually pretty refreshing. Here's Isaac Nada.
Obviously, when you run the ball that much and for that many yards, you're not going to get as many passing opportunities. And that's the same way for the receivers. At the end of the day, we're winning, and that's what matters. And when we are throwing it, we're completing it. So just improving in blocking, I feel like, if you're improving in something, you're getting better. So, I'm glad with that aspect of it, yeah.
So for right now, Isaac Nada is content to become a better blocker because the Georgia offense, given the fact that it rushed the ball more than 50 times a week ago against Vanderbilt, there's just not that many passes to go around on this team right now because Georgia's up by 4 touchdowns and running the ball to the tune of nearly 500 yards rushing in an SEC game like it did a week ago. And it could be that same blueprint works again on Saturday as well. Big lead, a lot of rushing plays, no need to get Isaac Nada involved. So this guy who wants to play in the NFL is content right now to kind of show on film the sort of work that makes him potentially an NFL prospect, which is more about just catching the ball, but it's also about blocking as well. But there's actually something that Kirby Smart said this week about another player that I think ought to make you feel confident that eventually Isaac Nada is going to be a big part of this offense by season's end. Do you remember what we played from Kirby Smart about Mecole Hardman the other day? Even though Hardman's having some drops, Kirby Smart says they're going to keep targeting Mecole over and over again. Here's Kirby on Mecole.
He's got to catch the ball. We're going to continue to throw it to him. We're not going to not throw it to him. I think Mecole's a work in progress. He's getting better each week. He's doing a good job in the return game. Nobody said it was going to be easy. It's not natural for a guy that didn't play receiver his whole life to go play receiver. And I know some of you guys in this room compare that to Terry Godwin. That's not true because Terry Godwin played receiver. I recruited him. Mecole did not, and it makes it very different for him.
So the reason why I play that clip of Kirby Smart talking about Mecole Hardman right after Isaac Nada talking about himself not getting more catches is I believe that there's a reason that Kirby Smart says they're going to keep targeting Mecole. They're going to keep throwing it to him even though he's got drops. Because Kirby Smart knows that Mecole Hardman's got the athleticism to eventually overcome those drops. And he's the kind of target, the kind of specimen, speed and skill and everything else that you've got to make a part of your offense. And I think that Isaac Nada, although it's a different position and a slightly different athletic skill set, it's very much the same way. When you've got these former five-star players like Mecole Hardman, like Isaac Nada, you've just got to find a way to get them involved. And there's a reason to believe that by the end of the season that both Hardman and Nada are going to be heavily involved in the Georgia offense to the tune of an effect that's going to make every Georgia fan happy. Why do I know this? Why is there evidence to believe this? Well, listen to the other name that Kirby Smart brought up there, Terry Godwin. Kirby says, hey, y'all can't assume that it's going to be as easy for McCole as it was for Terry Godwin because Godwin played receiver in high school. But while that may be sort of technically true, it sort of glosses over a larger point that for Godwin, things weren't always easy either, even though Godwin himself, much like Hardman and Nada, was also a former 5-star prospect coming out of high school. I mean, think back to April, coming off the spring. Think back to the praise that Kirby gave Godwin then about everything he'd overcome up to that point and the improvement that he showed. Let me remind you of what Kirby said about Godwin back after the Ajite game.
I'll tell you, man, when you look at practice, Terry Godwin, it's like night and day to me to watch that kid. And I was, very honest last year about Terry playing tougher, playing bigger. I mean, the guy is blocking hard. He's competing. He's taking more reps. He's such a better leader. I mean, to see him grow up, it means the world to me because I've seen that kid since his 9th grade year. And he's a vital piece of that slot. He and Jacob got great, intuitive instincts. I mean, they got great intuition of where each other's going to be.
So at the time, he said that he and Jacob Eason had good intuition, but now it's Jake Fromm and Terry Godwin who have good intuition. After all, Godwin's caught 5 touchdowns from Fromm so far this season. So let me see if I can quickly kind of summarize all this and wrap it up. At a certain point in time, I believe that Georgia is going to have to throw more because at a certain point in time, it's going to be in a close game or it might be trailing in the fourth quarter. But at that point, I think the Georgia offense is actually going to be ready to take a step forward and be even better then than it is right now. And I think a couple former 5-star prospects are going to be the key to doing that. Isaac Nott at the tight end position, who you just heard from, McCole Hardman, who you just heard Kirby Smart talking about. I think their maturation over the course of the next few weeks could be very much like Terry Godwin, who himself one point in time looked like he might be a little bit of a disappointment, but now he's a pivotal figure and a key part of the Georgia offense. And before 2017 is done, I believe that Nada and Hardman will be very much the same way. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Glad to have you with us. Whether you're watching us on Facebook Live, of course, 10 a.m. each and every Monday through Friday on the DawgNation Facebook page, or on the radio at noon every day on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. You can also check out the audio version of the podcast we posted for you each and every day at the world-famous DawgNation.com, on iTunes, SoundCloud. We try to make the podcast as easy to find for you as we possibly can. And we're counting it down every day between now and the cocktail party. 16 days from now, Georgia plays Florida. It's our Gator Hater Countdown. We think the Dogs beat the Gators on that day. We think that's a big step towards Georgia owning the East here in 2017, and that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about it. We're also incredibly excited about our DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville. And a lot of you have been asking, what is the DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville going to be like? Well, the one thing that we said is we want to make this be a good bit different than our DawgNation invasion to South Bend. As much fun as that was and as successful as that was kind of an exclusive event. Only a few people had a chance to be a part of this. Well, for the DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville, we're going to have a giant tailgate set up that day with a bunch of TVs. Our friends from Dixie Vodka are going to be on hand. We've got some special giveaways, some stuff from Kroger. We've got some really cool T-shirts that I'll look forward to telling you more about in the days ahead. It's going to start at 10 a.m. on the day of the game right there near the stadium in Jacksonville. You want to be a part of it, I can promise you. And as I said, it is brought to you in part by our friends at Dixie Vodka, the South's best-tasting vodka. You know, a lot of debate around this time of year in the South when it comes to college football, but there's no debate in Dixie Vodka. It is the South's best-tasting vodka, and they are one of our sponsors for our DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville coming up just 16 days from right now. I'm telling you, I get this countdown wrong every day, or at least I almost do. I've done it all year long, and I almost always stumble over, but it's 16 days from now, Georgia, Florida, in Jacksonville, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. All right, we'll have Seth Emerson here in a couple of minutes. Before we do that, let me let you hear a little bit more from Isaac Nada on a decidedly different subject. So Nada, you may have seen this, is sporting a new hairstyle now, kind of a bleach blonde look, very sort of California surferish a little bit. Well, he was kind of asked to explain what's going on there, and I thought he had a kind of a pretty interesting exchange with the media over this. Let me let you hear a more lighthearted version of Isaac Nada here. Take a listen.
I don't know. I just like to do things a little differently, and I'd like to have fun. So
is the change in the hair color part of that?
Yeah, I mean, that was just pure impulse. I just wanted to do it. There's so much stress in this life. I never know when my hair is going to go. So, I might as well do something with it while I can.
Well, what did Mom say about that, though?
She did it. So,
she did it. Okay.
Yeah, she's a former hairstylist. So,
okay.
But she wasn't happy at first. But when she did it, it's all right.
Tori's not getting jealous as he come in. And Tori's.
I don't know. We got some different hairstyles in our locker room, but I think he still got me.
So you hear him at the end there talking about his bleach blonde look and how it kind of compares to Torrey Johnson, one of the freshman offensive linemen for Georgia, who I know a lot of Dog fans fell in love with during the 2017 recruiting cycle. I actually think we have a side-by-side comparison here. Let's see whose hair looks a little better here. You see the blonde look for Nada. You see the Notori Johnson with kind of the sort of the two-tone look there. I don't know what the people on the other side of the glass think about this, but for me, I got to go Notori here. A, because it's a bigger part of Notori's repertoire. I love the fact that Notori changes his colors up. I like the fact that he's going two-tone right there. That seems to be a fit for his personality. I don't mind the Nada look. I mean, I'd give anything if I was that dashing and handsome like Isaac Nada is. But I'm gonna have to give the advantage here to Notori Johnson. I know a lot of Dog fans looking forward to having Notori on the field for Georgia, sporting that two-tone look or whatever hair color it is in the years ahead. And we think that Notori's heading for a really good career at UGA. All right, one of the things I was going to do here was talk to you about Rashad Chaney taking a visit to South Carolina. I actually don't have time for that right now. We'll do that a little later on in the week, but some pretty interesting quotes coming from Notori on that front. We will get to that a little bit later on in the week here at DawgNation Daily. We do have a fun show coming up. Got a special giveaway in Athens taking place on Saturday. We'll tell you about that in a little bit. I'll also invite you to check out the Planning for the Opponent piece at DawgNation.com here today. It's brought to you by Georgia United Credit Union and their all-new unified checking account. You can check out GUCU.org for a lot more on that. Of course, it's federally insured by NCUA. It is great to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily. Hope you enjoy Seth Emerson right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Seth Emerson, who's had great coverage at DawgNation.com once again this week of these Georgia practices. And boy, they seem to get more interesting every week, given everything that's out in front of this Georgia team at the moment. And Seth, if you don't mind, I want to start with a guy that I thought you wrote a really entertaining story about this week at DawgNation.com. We were just talking about Isaac Nada, and we'll put the hairstyle aside for a moment, focus on the stuff on the field. Do you see a need for Georgia to get Nada more involved in the offense before the end of the season? Or can this team kind of roll right on through the year doing what it's doing now, mostly running the football, only throwing when it absolutely has to?
No, I think they need to get him the ball. I think they need to get him involved, especially if the goal is to I mean, let's say it, to go to the playoff and try to win a national championship. I mean, they're number 4 in the country. It's time to reset the goals. Can they do that? I mean, I think that would involve the passing game has to get better. They have to be able to do more with it. But that's also not to say that the passing game can't do that. I mean, when they throw it, as Isaac Nada said last night, when they throw it, they do tend to complete it. They just don't throw it very much. But they're going to face some better defenses, not this Saturday, but maybe after that. Mm-hmm. But they're going to face some better defenses that are going to do a better job of holding their run game intact. So they're going to have to go to the air a little bit more, and that's where they're going to be tested, and that's where someone like Isaac Nada is going to have to be used, because Georgia's receivers are better, and Terry Godwin and Javon Wims are pretty good, but when you look at it, they're not quite rolling in, Calvin Ridley types. They're not even really rolling in Riley Ridley at this point. So it's not like Missouri, I think secretly, if Kirby Smart could trade his receiving core for Missouri's receiving core on Saturday and go forward with that, I think he probably would. He'd probably hate to give up, the future of some of those good receivers they have and Terry Godwin, but Jamon Moore and some of those guys are good, big, tall guys that can make plays. But they can't do that, so I think that, they do need Isaac Nada. They do need even Jeb Blazevich to be a little bit more of a factor. And you are seeing them involve guys like, DeAndre Swift on that touchdown the other day at Vanderbilt, things like that. They need to be a little bit more creative, and I think they know that.
Those Missouri receivers, by the way, showed some of that in the road game against Kentucky on Saturday where they were really moving the football. Tell me if you think this is like a false narrative, or if you, who are there every day, thinks this is true. I find it interesting that Kirby continues to compliment the way this team is practicing. I believe that he did that again on Tuesday, even though there was some heat and you had to go back and forth between the two venues, indoors and outdoors. He still thought it was a good practice. Said some of the same stuff going into the Tennessee game as well. We know what happened that day, 41-0 blowout. For a Kirby Smart coach who kind of wants to create the belief that too much positive talk is bad for the team, much like his old boss, Nick Saban. He wouldn't say practices were good unless they actually really were good. Is that an indication that this team is doing a pretty good job of blocking out some of the hype and the attention that people like me are heaping on them?
Well, they obviously have so far. I don't, put too much stock into what he says right away when he comes in and sees us and says this was a good practice or this was a bad practice. I think it's just kind of something he says. But obviously their kind of MO, this culture change, was make practices harder than the games. And you wonder if that would catch up to them at some point, as in, I think part of what led, something I heard from people on the inside last year, was part of what led to that slide last year that had them at 4-4, was they just started to get exhausted.
Yeah.
It was too much. Not only practices being harder, but these in-season lifts. They would have hard practices, and then they'd go out and they'd do a full lift, like later in the week, too. And they'd have to do a full lift on Sunday, too, after games and everything. But maybe it just took a year for all that to take effect, and they'll be, their endurance will be better this year. Maybe all of that is just completely overrated, and they just returned 10 guys on defense and are playing really well, and that makes everything else look better. That all remains to be seen.
So if Georgia was not a 30-point favorite, and if there wasn't a bye week next week, would Reggie Carter and maybe more specifically Trent Thompson, would their situations be handled differently right now than they're currently being handled? Because right now it seems like they're probably not playing. Is that due to the opponent in the bye week, or is that because these guys are dealing with some significant stuff?
Well, I think in Thompson's case, when he suffered the knee, you kind of looked at it and you said, all right, timetable here is usually like in that 2 to 4 week variety. And so, bye week after Missouri and then Florida, that looks the most reasonable. There's kind of precedent for Kirby Smart saying, we're fighting to get a guy available when, it didn't end up being close. Like with Malcolm Parrish, I think he said we're fighting to get him. It was either before App State or Notre Dame, but he didn't end up returning until a couple weeks later, even to practice. In Reggie Carter's case, we haven't been able to come out and say what he has. They keep saying undisclosed, but I think we saw what happened in the Tennessee game, and I guess if you guessed it, it's concussion-like symptoms or something, then
Sure.
Then you're probably not far off base, and that it becomes a Ron Corson matter about whether the person is cleared to go. So maybe they'd be trying to get Trent out there, and even maybe I don't know when you deal with the Reggie Carter thing. He had it last year, too, the concussion. That I think it really is a Ron Corson kind of thing. In Trent's case, we haven't seen him out there. Kirby said Tuesday after practice that he came out and did some stuff, didn't specify what, but imagine he probably came out and jogged a little bit, that kind of thing. Maybe they would try and push it, but they would probably need Reggie Carter more than Trenton Thompson. It seems crazy to say that, but they're so loaded on the defensive line.
Yeah.
But with Natrez out, maybe they'll still feel good with Juwan Taylor and Monty Rice another week, but you have to feel a lot better about the depth at defensive line than inside linebacker.
As you have pointed out before when you've been with us, this is a deep and talented roster, and everyone won't be contributing equally all the time. And I guess the latest person to kind of come up in terms of why aren't we seeing more of this guy is Richard LeCount on defense. The best I can tell, he doesn't appear in the stat sheet at all in the last 2 games. I'll admit I don't know if that means he did not play or if he just didn't show up in the stat sheet. But
he's played.
Okay.
He's played. I've seen him out there.
Okay, so but there are questions about kind of what's going on with LeCount here and kind of why he hasn't. It seems like his role has somewhat diminished here over the course of the season, and I told some folks I would field that question to you. Any comment on what's happening with LeCount here over the course of his freshman year?
One comment. J.R. Reed.
Yeah.
Next question. That's what's happened. J.R. Reed is playing really, really well. And they've had, I think Aaron Davis played, when they go in base, Aaron Davis has gone to cornerback with DeAndre Baker there. I guess the other comment is Tyreek McGee. He's played so well that Malcolm Parrish is relegated at this point to dime package duty. And then Aaron Davis has played some stars. Sometimes you even have Lorenzo Carter there. But the one alignment where Richard LeCount was going to see the field was as a safety with J.R. Reed moving up to
star, but they've felt more comfortable going with different alignments that result in J.R. Reed playing safety, and he's playing too well to take him out of the lineup.
Are you as fascinated as I am by the fact that this secondary is almost like a group apart from everything else going on at Georgia? Every other position group seems to be about, let's find bigger, better athletes, and the performance will go up because the recruiting has been better. This one group is like the one spot where it almost feels like not a SEC behemoth. It's about, hey, let's find a diamond in the rough at Tulsa. Let's get a walk-on to develop and turn into a good player. Let's cultivate some 3-stars here. It's a very almost non-SEC-like, certainly non-Georgia-like thing going on in the secondary, where it really is more about maturity and development and not just cold, hard recruiting that seems to be generating the success that group has had thus far this year.
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty lucky. I mean, go back to Murray Smith last year. Doesn't start at Alabama, comes in on like August 12th after he finally gets cleared to go and ends up being maybe the defensive MVP last year, not only a starter every game. J.R. Reed, Kirby's been pretty upfront that they got lucky there. They didn't know he was going to be this good. He didn't come out and say they were just trying to sign him to get D'Angelo Gibbs, but, probably doesn't need to admit that. We can all kind of see, and it turns out, he's playing and D'Angelo Gibbs is not. Aaron Davis, you mentioned, I mean, we kind of, that guy's kind of the cornerstone of the secondary at this point, and he was a guy who was a walk-on. Todd Grantham didn't even know he was there, basically, for the 1 year they were together. And even go back to Dominic Sanders. He ended up being a 4-year starter, could still break the school record for interceptions, and he was a 3-star recruit that Jeremy Pruitt said, I want that guy. Short time between taking the job and signing day. So, yeah, maybe that's an area that Georgia's just gotten lucky. Maybe that's an area that, you can kind of plug in a guy or two and have them end up exceeding expectations.
But that's the perfect transition for a piece that you wrote at DawgNation.com this week, and I know that Kirby Smart has talked some about, which is that thought that this secondary will still be challenged when it faces tough passing offenses. Now, Kirby apparently has got a lot of respect for this Missouri offense, maybe for good reason. I asked Chip Towers during our planning for the opponent piece if that was just coach speak or if this really is the offense you kind of need to be sort of paying attention to if you're a Georgia fan. I guess I'll ask you some version of the same question. Do you think that Drew Lock and this group is good enough to challenge this Georgia secondary on Saturday?
They are. It will be interesting to see how that goes. The other thing is when I read the opposing view that Chip did interviewing the Missouri beat writer for the Columbia paper, that he just kind of pointed to, it kind of reminds you of Missouri's results.
Right.
You think of them maybe because they're coming off the Kentucky game when they finally put up some points. It's like, oh, yeah, this is a big-time offense. You think back to last year's game when they started strong on Georgia. Yeah, they can throw it up and down, but, boy, they struggled to put up points in their other games, like against Purdue. So, this could be a game where the defense and the secondary get tested like it never has before. I mean, I could see Missouri putting up some points, and this getting, finally into the 20s, which it hasn't. Notre Dame scored the most points on Georgia at 19. But you also don't expect the game to be close because you expect Georgia to be able to almost score at will against what's a bad Missouri defense. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing I'm mostly interested about. If you say what's the one thing I really want to watch on Saturday night, it's how Georgia's secondary does against this passing attack, because it's a good quarterback and it's a good receiver group, and that's still the question I have about Georgia's secondary going forward is how they're going to do when they face a really good quarterback and receiver group and really good passing offense.
So Natrez Patrick's in the midst of a 4-game suspension. Kirby Smart won't confirm that, but that's obviously probably what's going to happen here. I guess the question I want to ask you, though, Seth, is so much has changed at Georgia over the last couple of years. Are you surprised this drug policy didn't change? Whether it should or it shouldn't, that's probably not even for me to decide. But so much else did change. Are you surprised that Georgia's drug policy didn't start to align itself a little more like the rest of the SEC? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I just don't know if it's been pushed behind the scenes. I mean, I know I was there when Mark Richt literally stood up and defended the drug policy. Kirby Smart has done that too. I think he went a little bit beyond this spring in saying, that he supports the policy. But I think behind the scenes, my experience has always been that these coaches look and say, well, this is a competitive disadvantage because other schools aren't doing it. And for all this talk over the years of we want the rest of the SEC to come to our policy rather than us go to theirs, that's not happening. But it's just not anything that I think is addressed. I don't think it's been there's been this. If there have been these huge meetings and pushback, Kirby trying to push for that to change, then I haven't heard about it. Maybe it's something he does after this year. I think if he continues to have a big year, he's going to be really on a a kick about facilities again. He's going to say, all right, thank you for the indoor, thank you for the West End Zone project. We also need a new weight room. We also need this. And then he also may push for something on drug policy. But, Georgia's kind of backed itself into a corner, too. As an institution, as an athletic department, being so, protective and defensive about this policy, if they even just kind of quietly change it, then they're going back on that. And it may be something they have to do. They may just have to take the PR hit and do it. Or they may just say, look, we still feel this way and just, we'll take it. If it costs us some games by some good players, then they do know the policy. They shouldn't be doing it.
I want to ask you one final question, and I want to ask you to predict how much you think Justin Fields will play next year. If you think he's going to be a good player at Georgia, that's probably a different conversation for a different day. But I guess I am curious if you've got an opinion on what you think the dynamic's going to be like with a third 5-star quarterback in the mix at Georgia. What's that going to do to the chemistry of the team? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that sort of embarrassment of riches for one team at the quarterback position?
All I know is that they're going to try and make it so that there are 3 on campus next year. And if Justin Fields doesn't enroll early, that'll help. That'll help keep, let's be frank, it'll help keep Jacob Eason around.
Right.
If he's able to compete with just Jake Fromm in the spring and, this idea that, Fields will get here too late to, really be able to do something with it. But if Fromm has, entrenched himself, then I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying I don't know if there will be 3 5-star guys at the same time. But if there are, then we will happily write about it as much as possible because that's what everyone will be interested in. But I just think there's a long time between now and all of that. There's a lot of dynamics. I would not write off Jacob Eason in this team's plans yet, and I mean as soon as Saturday. I'm not sure he'll play unless the game becomes a blowout, but I don't think Kirby Smart and Jim Chaney are throwing him aside by any means. I think there's still a sense that you don't know what Jacob could have done if he didn't get hurt. Who knows? Maybe this offense would have been even better with him out there. It's just unknowable. So I think there's a lot of football to be played between now and the moment Justin Fields officially joins this team.
Seth, that's really fascinating stuff. Thanks for your time here on DawgNation Daily. We'll look forward to more from you at DawgNation.com in the days ahead, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon here on the program as well.
All right. Talk to you later.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Boy, really good stuff from Seth there when it comes to Justin Fields, Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason. Not done yet with Eason, he says. A lot of quarterbacks on one team at one time. I would imagine that that's something he may be writing a good bit about in the weeks and months ahead. Pretty good stuff there from Seth when it comes to those quarterbacks, and I know everybody's got their own opinion about how that's going to play out, but I thought that from Seth was pretty interesting. By the way, as we get ready to transition to our SEC Through, I'll remind you, coming up in just a moment, Roxy Jackson's going to be with us. Roxy going to tell us about a fun thing happening in Athens around the town on Saturday, courtesy of Kroger. That's going to be fun with her coming up. You can be a big winner, courtesy of Roxy and DawgNation. We'll tell you about that and our friends at Kroger. By the way, before any of that, though, of course, our DawgNation Invasion's coming up to Jacksonville. It's also brought to you in part by our friends at Marlowe's, and right now Marlowe's got a reminder for you. To savor our center-cut grilled pork chop served with toasted spaghetti squash, French green beans, dried cranberries, and spice seeds, and apple cider sage cream. That's now through October 16th. It's only a few days left for you to enjoy that, but nothing says fall like that great center-cut pork chop entree from Marlowe's. We love hanging out with Marlowe's, and we're excited about Marlowe's being a part of the DawgNation Invasion to Jacksonville with us as well. Let me do the SEC Through here, talk some SEC stuff with you for a moment. So there's the Story from ESPN.com. Mark Schlabach, one of the writers there, a couple other folks contributing to this story also, that an Auburn player from the 2015 team had a test taken by basically an academic mentor provided to him, and the player himself never took this exam, got an A on the exam, and that's the story that's out there courtesy of ESPN.com, and there's obviously going to be a lot of reaction to this around Auburn, and I know that there'll be the attempt to kind of tie this to the softball scandal at Auburn, the ongoing basketball scandal at Auburn, and this would certainly seem to be a program that cultivates drama, maybe more so than others do. Maybe this is, a moment for Greg McGarity to pat himself on the back at least a little bit to say, hey, we're not as bad as Auburn is. My guess is, though, that when this is all said and done, this is ultimately going to be more smoke than fire. Because, look how long this academic scandal has been kind of unfolding at North Carolina. I still don't think the other shoe is dropped there, and that's related to basketball. The NCAA obviously dragging its feet because North Carolina is, or at least my opinion is, that North Carolina is a big revenue producer for that sport that matters a lot to the NCAA, so therefore they're not going to drop the hammer on North Carolina. That's my opinion. I think the same thing's true for Auburn here as well. This may have happened, but all Auburn has to do is say, we're investigating the matter, go long on its own investigation, drag it out forever, and within 3 weeks, no one will even remember this at all. And within 6 months, still nobody remembers. And all of a sudden, there's not quite as much, motivation to kind of come out and say something along those lines. So that's kind of what my guess is will happen here. That ultimately, this may seem like a big deal now, but by the time the actual findings are released, we'll have all stopped caring about that. That's usually the defense mechanism that a lot of these schools use when they're facing something like that. Far more important and interesting to me is what's happening on the field. We had a really interesting conversation on AT&T SEC Country Live yesterday about Auburn on the field. And ESPN wrote about this. We may talk about this some tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, about the most important player for each top 25 team. Georgia was not a quarterback. It was Roquan Smith. We'll deal with Roquan later on. For Auburn, it was Jarrett Stidham. For Alabama, it was Jalen Hurts. And kind of which of these two quarterbacks, we asked on our show yesterday, sort of instills the most confidence in its fan base right now? Which of these two quarterbacks is going to be most likely to kind of step up and play well when the season is on the line? Is it Stidham? Is it going to be Hurts? And we get some commenters in the show yesterday that say you got to put Jake Fromm in that discussion as well. I think that's probably true, but it does seem like in the Auburn's case, they're going to try to build their offense more around the passing game eventually than Georgia's probably going to. And I think that, while the overall passing yards for Hurts may be a little better than for Fromm, as we talked about yesterday, Fromm has been a lot more efficient and maybe on deep throws a lot more accurate. So I actually think that if I had one game to win tomorrow, I'd probably rather have Jake Fromm than Jalen Hurts, even though Hurts, was essentially the SEC Player of the Year a year ago. But that side-by-side comparison between those two quarterbacks in Alabama, the Crimson Tide's Jalen Hurts, Auburn's Jarrett Stidham, I think that could be really fun here before year's end. When you think about Florida Texas A&M on Saturday, you think about a Gators team that desperately needs a win if it wants to keep pace in the SEC East. Gators also dealing with a couple sort of questionable statuses for two of its most important offensive players. Tyree Cleveland, the wide receiver, Kadarius Toney, who's kind of like their wildcat, do-everything kind of offensive weapon. Right now, both of those guys listed as questionable here. I think A&M's better than LSU, and I think this is another tough challenge for Florida in the Swamp on Saturday. I'll also tell you one more thing here before we close out the SEC through. One of the things that I think is going to be really interesting this weekend is going to be exactly how you sort of figure out how the middle of this SEC is going to work out. We know the top of this league right now. It's Alabama, it's Georgia, it's Auburn. But below that, is the pecking order fully established? Tennessee, South Carolina gives us a chance to see that. So does Texas A&M, Florida. So does Auburn, LSU. Some of that stuff may start to work its way out a little bit on Saturday, and we'll see how that does play out. We'll make that your SEC through. All right, I'm going to get ready to slide over here. We'll get ready to welcome in Roxy Jackson here on DawgNation Daily. No really unawkward way to do this, but I'll just sort of slide over here, and we'll get ready to say hello to Roxy here on DawgNation Daily. We'll bring her in. And I know that Roxy's got a big thing going on in Athens on Saturday, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And look at Roxy. She's also brought some food here as well. This is impressive. A lot of great stuff from Kroger, and this is one of the cool things that Roxy's doing in Athens for every Georgia home game. She's giving out those Kroger scratch-off cards. It's your chance to win a $150 gift card to Kroger, courtesy of the Kroger Click List. But she's also got those recipe cards giving out. And an example of one of those here today. Roxy, give us an idea of what you've brought here. First of all, you got recipe card in hand, but give us an idea of what you've brought.
So today I brought the chili crunch dogs. So here is an example of the
Take a
finished
look at this.
chili
this
crunch
is like
dogs.
on the Today Show or something when they bring out the food. It's like this is actually very impressive here, Roxy. I had no idea that you were so capable and able in the kitchen.
But you know what? I'm not even able in the kitchen. It's just really easy to make these. It takes 5 minutes. All you need are these Kroger hot dogs, this Kroger brand chili, and even this Kroger brand cheddar cheese and chips. It's super easy. All you have to do is put the hot dogs on the grill and throw it together, and it's perfect for your Georgia tailgate.
And you know what's even easier than that is picking them up at Kroger, because you can use the Kroger Click List. If folks go to Kroger.com, they can find out more about the Kroger Click List, but there's no easier way to pick up your groceries from Kroger than by using the Kroger Click List.
Oh, for sure. And Kroger Click List comes right to you. The people, as soon as you order online, the people come right to your car and deliver exactly what you order, the most fresh produce, the most fresh meats, or anything that you could possibly want, and it's super accessible for anyone.
So y'all look for Roxy on Saturday. She'll give you one of these Kroger recipe cards, and you can make some of these great things as well, including, what's this called again?
The Kroger Chili Crunch Dog.
The Kroger Chili Crunch Dog. But another reason why you want to see Roxy on Saturday is not for the Kroger recipe cards. She's also got those Kroger scratch-offs as well. And Roxy, you're looking for those best tailgates in Athens and a chance to give out some of those Kroger scratch-offs, and somebody's going to win $150 courtesy of Kroger, $150 gift card courtesy of Kroger.
You know what? Our dogs keep winning, so I want our fans to keep winning too. All you have to do is scratch and win. You're guaranteed to win. And if you tweet at me at RoxyDrewJ, you can tell me exactly why I should visit your tailgate and why you should win $150.
So you're guaranteed to win, and somebody's going to even be a bigger winner than that with a $150 gift card courtesy of Kroger. Give us your Twitter handle one more time, because I know you want to see a lot of DawgNation tailgaters on Saturday. What's your Twitter handle again?
It's at RoxyDrewJ, so that's RoxieDrewJ.
So say hello to Roxy on Twitter, and she'll come by and see you in Athens on Saturday. Now, I got to ask you about this. You mentioned the dogs keep winning, and it's actually been the first home game coming up on Saturday for the first time in a while. How much fun have you been having this year with these Kroger tailgates and the experience in Athens? It's been a really cool year so far. The atmosphere for these home games has been fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. I've never met a fan base as good as the Dogs. The fans are great. They always welcome me into their tailgates as I'm kind of bombarding them with these scratch-offs, but they welcome me with open arms. They always offer me some food or drink, and most of them even shop at Kroger. So that was a nice surprise going into these tailgates. So maybe I can see some of these chili crunch dogs at their tailgates as well.
So give us that Twitter handle one more time.
At RoxyDrewJ.
All right, at RoxyDrewJ. Hit her up on Twitter. You can let her know where you're tailgating on Saturday. You can have a chance to win a $150 gift card courtesy of Kroger. And as Roxy said, the scratch-off guarantees you some sort of win. It's not going to be $150 for everybody, but it's going to be some sort of win, right?
Exactly.
And another big win is for you, for your tailgate, because listen, we all know this. Everybody's working hard Monday through Friday. When it comes time to get to Athens on Saturday, all you want to do is just make that as easy as possible. Well, the easiest possible way to do that is with our friends at Kroger and the Kroger Click List. Roxy, if they check out Kroger.com, they're going to see for themselves that this is the best way to get all your Kroger brand tailgate items, everything you need to make a perfect tailgate. You can get it all right there at Kroger, courtesy of the Kroger Click List on Kroger.com.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Always good to talk to you, and we'll get ready to wrap up the show. All right, good stuff from Roxy Jackson. Always like it when she comes by to say hello to us here on DawgNation Daily, and hope you will tweet at her. Let her know where you're tailgating on Saturday. She'll come on by and see you. She's got those Kroger scratch-off cards to give away, and you have a chance to be a big winner there. Speaking of big winners, Georgia has been a big winner so far this season, and one of the people that's noticed that's Georgia coach Mark Richt. Now, you may have seen this. I know it's up at DawgNation.com right now. So I guess Rick was speaking during one of his media availabilities on Wednesday, and he talked about how happy he was to see Georgia having the success that it's having. And it's another reason why I think so many people have so much, still to this day, nice things to say about Mark Richt. His leadership of Georgia for 15 years took the Dogs to some pretty nice places. 2 SEC championships, a whole host of finishes in the top 10. But also now he's at Miami. He seems to be doing well, and certainly Georgia doing very well with Kirby Smart at the helm now. This seems to have worked out well for both parties, and it's really nice to see Richt giving Georgia some compliments. We'll see you tomorrow right here on DawgNation Daily. And now, on video for our audience here, I'm going to do the awkward step of sliding back over one more time and see if I can get ready to take some of your comments, because I feel like I'm way over here on the other side of the table. It's only like a few inches different, but something about this just feels very different than from what we normally do. So if you don't mind, I'm going to awkwardly slide back over here one more time. And I think my folks behind the glass were trying to give me some help a moment ago with a full-screen graphic to kind of move, and I wasn't really paying attention to that like I should have been. So that's on me, but nonetheless, we'll dive into some of your questions and comments right now. Wayne Folan says, welcome back, BA. Yeah, from one side of the desk to the other. The one thing that y'all got to know about me is I'm such a creature of habit that everything has to be the exact same way every single day. I'm not like excessively OCD, probably a little bit. How I position the laptop on the screen so I can see what I'm looking for, and how I position like myself in front of the camera. It's like, y'all got to realize that while I have a kind of a nice demeanor, behind the scenes, I'm a little more high maintenance than you might realize. Brett Page says, where can we find you on Saturday? Go back to the video. It's at Roxy Drew J. Is that what it is? At Roxy Drew J. Hit her up on Twitter, at Roxy Drew J, and you can tell her where you're tailgating, because she's looking for some of those DawgNation tailgaters. Robert Hunt says, my forehead shining today. DawgNation didn't give you a makeup artist. So here's the thing about the makeup, Robert, and then we'll get to some more serious questions after this. I used to do TV in the old days, and if my wife helped me with the makeup, it always looked kind of fine, right? When I did my own makeup, it was always too dark or just too much or just too something. It never really looked right. So we started doing a lot of this Facebook Live stuff. I stopped doing the makeup, but I did notice, yes, the forehead is a little shiny. I think the problem is that my forehead keeps getting higher and higher and higher, because every few months the hairline seems to be going up and up and up. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about, but that's kind of the thing there. Jason Lee laughs at me for being high maintenance. James Crump on a football subject says, give Eason a complete game this year, and then I might agree about what some are saying. Not fair to judge Eason off last year. And so I think that James brings up a lot of good points there. That with more football to play, and by the way, I thought Seth's stuff on Eason was pretty provocative there. That was a bigger defense of Eason than we've heard from really any media member in quite some time. For the most part, the media has kind of been moving off of Eason here over the last few weeks, probably even me a little bit here as well at DawgNation Daily, if I'm to be honest. I thought Seth's defense of Eason was pretty interesting. Now, I will admit, I don't totally agree with what Seth just said there, but that was a pretty interesting comment. So I would imagine we may circle back on that at a certain point in time, but I agree with what James said. If you gave Eason a full game, would he show more than he's shown in these brief glimpses thus far this season? The truth is, he might. He very well might. The problem is that opportunity is not available right now. All we know is what we actually see on the field, and Eason's a guy who needs a good moment. What I did not have time to talk to Seth about was, but he wrote about this, and y'all should check this out. In that second glance piece, and one of the reasons why I didn't bring this up today is because I just didn't want to do anything negative today. I wanted to try to keep the show as positive as I could, but since Eason's subject came up, I'll say this now in this video comment portion of our program here. Seth talked about Eason after the game against Vanderbilt. Everybody else is celebrating. Eason, helmet on, kind of quietly walking back to the locker room. I didn't want to necessarily highlight that because I didn't want to draw attention to what I think is maybe a little bit of a negative storyline. But that's maybe something to pay attention to here. That right now, I believe Fromm is playing too well to give up that starting job, to give up the lion's share of the snaps when the game is truly undecided. That quarterback for me right now is supposed to be Jake Fromm. But Georgia does have to try to find a way to keep Eason involved and engaged and not getting down on himself. I think Kirby Smart has done that with Eason going back to when he first enrolled at Georgia. Different moments to kind of make him feel confident, make him feel okay about himself. There was the D recruitment early, going back to spring of 2016, and maybe a little bit more of the pats on the back ever since then to make him feel a little bit better about himself. This may be one of those moments when Eason does need some pats on the back. And if Eason gets time against Missouri on Saturday, this may also be a moment when maybe Georgia would do well to see Eason have some good moments on the field, because this is a guy who could probably use a confidence boost right here at the moment. Chris Sandridge says Eason handed the ball off 7 times out of 10 against App State. Did he not block or something? SMH, meaning shaking my head. I think part of what it was is people just saw a lack of accuracy when he did throw the ball. And you're right. This is 3 pass attempts. It's not fair to pin that on Eason, but But what some people will say is, and I'm just telling you the conversation. Please don't, as they say, kill the messenger on this. What some people will say is the 3 passes that Eason missed on against Appalachian State were eerily reminiscent of some of what happened for him in 2016. And if you're going to say back to that, that's too small of a window to make a judgment, I totally agree, but that's what the argument is right now. Tyler Herring on Stetson Bennett. Boy, I heard something really good on Bennett the other day. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but there's some people just raving about how Bennett's apparently practicing with the scout team. I don't really know what that means, but some people are definitely saying that. Scott Crisler asked about who's behind Bryce Ramsey. I guess it would be Stetson Bennett right now. Al Clements says play Eason the second half of the Missouri game on Saturday. This should be understood in advance before the game. Honestly, that's not what I'd want to do. I mean, unless Fromm, just for whatever reason, is not playing well, and then at that point in time, I think you're free to put the guy in that you want to put in. But if Fromm is having one of these like 9 for 11 type games again against Missouri and Georgia's churning up a bunch of rushing yards, then Fromm's your quarterback against Florida. And therefore, you want the extra reps for Fromm going into the Florida game. I mean, remember, y'all, that Florida game's a big deal to me. And if I thought that there was any doubt in my mind that Fromm might not be up to that challenge, I'm speaking here not as a coach, because obviously it's not my decision, but as what I'd prefer to see happen, I'd be the one talking up, let's get Jacob Eason back in this game. Let's see what he can do. Let's find out here. But right now, I'm okay with Fromm. And if I'm riding with him in the Florida game, then I want to give him 3 quarters on Saturday, assuming this is an easy win, which may be a false assumption, but for now, we'll take the point spread for what it is. I'm riding Fromm for 3 quarters on Saturday, and I'd like to give Eason a full quarter, and I'd like to see Georgia throw the ball there in that spot so we can develop some confidence. But for the moment, Fromm's my quarterback against Florida. David Johnson says, I continue to believe that Eason has a higher upside than Fromm. You may be right about that. Eason is almost for sure going to be a higher draft pick in the NFL than Fromm. I mean, this almost reminds me of, for those of you who are, college football fans, been around for a while. Do you remember when Chris Sims was at Texas and Major Applewhite was at Texas? Sims always looked more like the NFL quarterback, but Major Applewhite was the guy that had more success on the field. And there have been a lot of examples of that in college football. For some reason, Sims and Applewhite just kind of comes to mind here. Even if Jake Fromm has a great college career and Eason has a only average college career, NFL scouts are going to like Eason better. That's just true. And that's what I think David's talking about. Higher upside belongs to Jacob Eason. The guy who looks more like the kind of guy that could be a franchise NFL quarterback is Eason. And that's true no matter what the college stats say. But, I'm not their agent. I don't get a percentage of their future income. I'm a guy who wants to see Georgia win with the quarterback it can win with right now. And even though that Eason may have the higher upside, Fromm may be the quarterback just more ready to help Georgia win right now. Both those things can be true at the same time. Hal Love says armchair quarterback now. That's talking about me. Listen, that's essentially what this job is. And by the way, we're all the same way on that. I may have the microphone in front of my face, but we all essentially do the same kind of stuff where we talk about what we think should happen, what we wish would have happened, and what we hope happens next time. And that's just kind of what we do around here. Travis Kelly says, any word on Trey Hill, Luke Ford? So I can tell you what Jeff has written the last couple of days. So apparently Luke Ford told Jeff it's a 3-way tie for him. Or it's 3 schools. I want to get the verbiage exactly right here. One of those, obviously, Georgia. The other one I would assume is Alabama. And is the third school, is that still Arkansas? Is Arkansas still in the mix for Luke Ford right now? I'm guessing that Ford is going to be a Georgia guy here. I mean, there's even some Alabama message board chatter about some concern about Alabama not being able to win with this tight end that they want to win with. I'm assuming that Ford's a Georgia guy. I guess I'm also assuming that Trey Hill's a Georgia guy. Please understand this is my prediction. The one thing I do know is that Hill has visited Auburn a lot. I know that Benjamin Wolk had some quotes from Hill the other day, and I know Jeff wrote about Hill too. So I'm sure Jeff had these quotes also. Sometimes it's sort of hard to keep up with where you read all these quotes, but Hill will definitely kind of throw out there that Auburn's in okay shape with him. That Auburn is kind of a guy that's a program that's done enough to earn some visits from him. If I had to guess, and I don't do the online crystal ball type stuff, but if I had to guess, I would guess that Ford and Hill are more likely Georgia commits. But that's my opinion. Jeff will be here tomorrow. We'll get more of the facts from him. Adam Poe said it's Michigan, the other school for Luke Ford. I apologize. Chris Standard was talking about some tweets from Brian Harry, and I didn't see those. I'll try to take a look at that. Armand Rashad on the quarterback situation says, forget fairness, go with who's getting the job done. Just look back a few years. It was Murray or Mettenberger. We all know how that turned out. That's true. I mean, if it's my son, I want fairness. And if it was your son, you'd want fairness too. But it's not our sons, and when it's the more objective analysis that doesn't come from it being like your flesh and blood in this conversation, you realize that you got to do what's best for the team. And it's not always clear what's best for the team when it comes to these quarterbacks, but for now, what seems to be best is keeping Fromm in the game. Bobby Bryan says, what's up, BA? Checking in from Hudson, Florida, and will be in Athens this weekend for homecoming. You're giving away T-shirts. Please pencil me in, LOL. We won't do T-shirts for this game on Saturday, but we will be in Jacksonville giving T-shirts away there that day. And we'll tell you more about these T-shirts. I think y'all are going to really, really like these. We'll tell you more about that. And the great news is, courtesy of our sponsors, they're totally free. So while supplies last anyway. So we'll tell you all about that. Hashim Spikes, going back to that quarterback comparison I made up with the Texas kids from guys from a few years ago. He says the difference is that Applewhite was stabbed in the back by Mac Brown in favor of grossing over to Chris Sims. Yeah, I guess that is the point maybe I left out there, that Mac Brown did make a bad quarterback decision there. That's a good point. I'd forgotten about that. Nakia Hester says Fromm can pass the ball. I think it's more of a hands issue with the receivers. There have been some drops, no doubt about that. This receiving core is not as good now as will be in 2 years, for sure. Jake Frigo says, are people not seeing Fromm throwing and completing deep balls, 15-plus yard completions consistently? He's doing great. I don't see a quarterback controversy. I see W's, go Dogs. Jake, I have to admit, I agree with you, especially after looking at the stats yesterday. We talked about this. And, y'all, I'm not going to say a bad word about Jacob Eason. I'm just not. It's not what I do around here. These guys are not getting paid. I'm not going to trash them or anything like that. But if you look at the stats, Fromm is having a much better freshman year than Eason did. And, the total completion percentage will say what it says. The total passing yards at the end of the year will say what it says. Eason's, game-winning touchdowns is going to probably be more than what Fromm is going to be because Georgia played more close games last year. So, you can spin numbers how you want, but I gave you that yards per attempt number yesterday. Fromm is 2.2 yards per attempt higher per throw than Eason was last year. And that's a big thing for me. I mean, Eason was not perfect last season, and in limited work this year, Fromm, I believe, has been better. Randy Hall says status on Adam Anderson. That's another name we'll talk to Jeff about tomorrow, but the last I heard on this is that Alabama is really making Anderson a priority. And this is one of those things when, it used to be that if Alabama made a player a priority, there was nothing that Georgia could do. It was just over. Georgia could not do anything. But lately, that hasn't exactly been true. I mean, Alabama kind of made Walter Grant a little bit of a priority. Certainly let him know that he was a take for them, that they were looking to have him in their program, and Georgia still won. I know good and well Alabama made D'Angelo Gibbs a priority, and Georgia still won that battle. Is this one of those situations now where under Kirby Smart, Georgia as a recruiting power has risen to the point where if Alabama makes players a priority, right now it seems like based on some of the stuff I've read online, they're doing with Adam Anderson. Is this one of those things where Georgia says, I don't care you've made him a priority, he's a priority for us too, and we're gonna beat you out for him. That could be where Kirby and Georgia is at right now in terms of its recruiting prowess. Clearly, though, it's a lot higher than it used to be a couple years ago when if Alabama wanted a player that Georgia wanted, then Georgia basically had to sort of settle for second best. That's not the way it is anymore. Justin Sisk says, the majority of Fromm's incompletions are drops, making the smart decision to throw it away. May be true. John Rhodes says, I can't listen to this dude. He just talks too much. Well, John, I appreciate you trying to listen. Thanks for being here when you can. We always like to have you here on DawgNation Daily. This is a talk show, but I'm glad to have you on the program here today. Justin Griffin says the O-line is the kicker from last year. Yeah, the offensive line this year is so much better than it was last year, and that has clearly helped Fromm. That's what somebody said to me on Twitter yesterday, too, that, or at least a version of this, that Fromm's stats this season may just indicate that the quarterback position at Georgia is a pretty good spot to be in right now. And there's an element of that that's probably true. And if Eason this year had the offensive line for Georgia this year, then his year is probably better than it was last year. That's a fair point to bring up. Nicole House says far more wide receiver drops last year, less protection on the line last year. That's probably true. Tyler Herring says the Fromm-Eason debate is a good problem to have. I'm okay either way as long as the wins keep coming. That's well said, Tyler, on both fronts. A Georgia team winning makes the quarterback issue not all that consequential. You can sort of navigate whatever happens here. And trying to decide which five-star quarterback is the best for your program is a lot better scenario than hoping you can drag a transfer down from Virginia to beat out a guy that's never played. I mean, you want to talk about dramatic increase in the quarterback situation for Georgia here in just a couple of years. That's exactly what's going on. And, by the way, Jim Chaney's use of these quarterbacks this season has been pretty good, too. Let me scroll up, see if we can get some more comments going on. I'm a little bit behind the comment section. We're also running a little late here. Brandon Tank Partlow says, ask Fromm to throw 55 passes, see how many interceptions he will throw. You're right, Brandon. He'll throw some more at that point in time. And for me, the issue is not avoiding mistakes. I think too many Georgia quarterbacks for too long played that game of just trying to avoid mistakes. Think about Hudson Mason in 2014. Mason threw virtually no interceptions, had a pretty high completion percentage. But did he make any plays? This goes back to what Jim Donnan said on DawgNation Daily back during the offseason. What he's looking for from quarterbacks is not avoiding interceptions. It's the whatever it takes, the guts, courage, intelligence, whatever combination of the three to make a tough throw. And so ultimately the Eason-Fromm debate, I believe, should be decided not by who avoids mistakes. It's who makes the biggest and better throws. That's ultimately what's going on here. I mean, think about your own, life. If I came on DawgNation Daily and said, when I speak, I've got to make sure I don't ever say anything wrong. I've got to make sure I never give an opinion that can be proven wrong or will end up being wrong. I've got to be very careful not to make a mistake. It's a pretty boring show at that point in time, and boring shows aren't recipes for lasting very long. Same thing for any sort of profession or trade or skill. Being afraid of making mistakes, doing whatever you can do to avoid mistakes, doesn't necessarily lead to a lot of success. So I hope that in terms of the evaluation of these quarterbacks, that it's about more than just who avoided mistakes, because the easiest way to avoid mistakes is to never try anything hard. Nakia Hester, thanks for the kind words. Al Clement says, I know that many think this is a stupid statement, but there's not a coach in the SEC who would trade for Kirby Smart. That includes Saban. Listen, right now Kirby Smart's giving a lot of evidence to support that. And I'm not telling you he's eclipsed Saban or that he's even going to be as good as Saban. But he's certainly recruiting right now at a pace that Saban was recruiting. And, for me, like the on-field coaching stuff has always been overrated. Is Kirby Smart pushing buttons during games? Making decisions during games? Is Mel Tucker, is Jim Chaney making decisions during games that lead to wins? I don't necessarily think so. I don't think that Nick Saban is either. I think Kirby Smart's very clear about what his recipe is. Find the best players you can get, work them really hard during practice, and then games are easy. I honestly think that college football at the highest level is that simple. Get better players than your opponent, make sure that their practices are intense, fast-paced, and that the entire program is sort of built around being the best you can be. And then on Saturdays, just go out and clobber your opponent. I mean, that's what Georgia's doing right now. And Smart, what makes him a good coach, if this is indeed the blueprint for future success for him, is about the fact that he just sort of follows that simple formula. Gary and Christian Gilisano on Jalen Hurts says if he threw 55 passes, he'd probably throw a lot of picks too. That's probably true. Boy, a lot of quarterback stuff today. Buck Brinson remembering back to the David Green, DJ Shockley combination. And Shockley, was one of those guys that had to wait his turn. Eventually it led to an SEC championship, so that worked out pretty well. And, of course, we all remember and love the David Green years here as well. Let me see if I can scroll up and get a couple more. Kevin Royster on the offensive line says it's looking better every week. It really is. And one more thing that Seth wrote about was how Lamont Gilliard played in the Vanderbilt game. This is a guy who's getting better. Converted defensive lineman, a bit of a project last year trying to play on the offensive line, but really improving and really getting better. Interior of the offensive line is getting better because of him. Kinley's just a good player. He's a big guy that can push everybody around. But Gilliard's an example of a guy who's just learning how to play. That, a lot of people said for Sam Pittman. We know that Pittman is a good recruiter. Can he develop players as well? Well, Gilliard's an example of a guy that is getting developed. I'd probably also say the same thing about Kendall Baker as well, who had a chance to be a starter last season, wasn't up to that task just yet, but this year seems to be kind of holding his own, not to mention the fact that Solomon Kinley, who was not thought to be a big recruiting win at the time. Everybody was paying attention to Pittman for the class of 2016. Kinley was not a guy that a lot of people necessarily knew all that much about, but he's really, when healthy, becoming one of the most important linemen Georgia has, so you got to give Pittman a lot of credit for that. All right, I'm late. We got to go. 3 p.m. Eastern time today, AT&T SEC Country Live. We'll do some Georgia stuff on there for you, getting ready for Missouri on Saturday. I'm back tomorrow again at 10 a.m. Hope you all have a great day. If you missed a portion of our regular broadcast, we'll post the audio version of the show at DawgNation.com. Also on iTunes, you can subscribe to it there. And I know there was a weird problem with Facebook yesterday, and I apologize for those of you that tried to watch the re-air of this show and couldn't find it for a while. Hopefully that's all cleared up right now. But thanks for seeking the show out. Thanks for watching. Let's get ready for a fun one on Saturday. We'll see you tomorrow for the final show of the week, DawgNation Daily Live then. Hope you all have a great day.